Who are the 10 dirtiest players in NBA history? That's a question that's hard to answer because dirty is such a hard thing to define. Different people consider dirty in different ways. Let us start this off by saying that dirty is not bad. If you want a list of the league's dirtiest players, it's going to look very similar to a list of its best defensive players. Great defense is knowing how to get away with being dirty. Some players have a reputation for being dirty because of a single hard foul or cheap shot, but otherwise weren't necessarily dirty players. This list is more about who is good at being dirty than it is a recounting of the hardest fouls or most famous violent instances in NBA history. Hey guys, welcome back to your favorite basketball channel, Swish. In this video, we bring to you the 10 dirtiest NBA players in the league's history. Let's begin. Number 10, Rasheed Wallace. Rasheed Wallace physically abused his opponents and verbally abused the officials for his entire career. He wasn't too subtle about it either, which is why he is the NBA's all-time leader in technical fouls with 304. He also owns the single-season record with 40. On one hand, he would commit some of the most egregious fouls, and then on the other hand, he would feign shock that he ever got called at all. If you asked Wallace, he never committed a single foul. If you were to make a TV show about Rasheed Wallace, it would be called Dirty Big Liars. Number 9, Karl Malone. Karl Malone was one of the master pupils in the Jerry Sloan School of Dirty Play. The Malone Jazz were such a dirty team that they didn't have showers in the locker room. Don't take that literally. Malone is the epitome of what we mean when we say the aggregate of little cheap shots greatly exceed the big cheap shot. He didn't ever deliver that Kevin McHale clothesline, but he was a far dirtier player. I'm willing to wager that he easily hit 5,000 players with elbows in his career. He had over 11,000 boards, and virtually every time he went up for one, he was hitting someone, so that's a conservative estimate. Number 8, Charles Oakley. Charles Oakley may very well be the toughest player in the history of the league. He is at the very least the toughest I've ever seen. Oak Tree is the perfect nickname for him, as it was about as easy to move one out of the way. Oakley, who once said, "Oh well, that's basketball. It used to be basketball. We don't know what it is now." After being assessed with a flagrant foul, would be one player who would be proud to be on this list, but insulted that he wasn't higher. Number 7, Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett could easily be on top of this list. He's been known to slap opponents in the testicles while they're going up for jump shots. He pushes players around. He talks trash that goes too far. He calls people cancer patients. His language on the court is about as vulgar as a sailor's. He blocks every shot that goes up when the shot clock ends, just so the opponent can see it not go in. It's not so much about these things being as it is about his mental approach. He wants you to feel bad about yourself. He's just mean. Number 6, Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard is seen as the nice guy, playing and joking, and there is that side of him. On the other hand, he pushes a lot, and having the physique of a 7-foot Michelangelo statue, that's a strong man to be shoving you around. Howard is the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, and he's a great defensive player, but a lot of that has to do with the way he's able to establish position, often through illegal contact. There's legal jockeying for position, and there's illegal jockeying for position, and a lot of times it's illegal with Howard. He just gets away with it because of his star status. When refs call the game tight, he often will be in foul trouble 6 minutes into the game. Number 5, John Stockton. John Stockton is the single biggest, most bothersome, most annoying pest in the history of the game. Don't get us wrong, we think he's one of the most underrated players in the history of the game too. We love the guy. He was as dirty as a third world city though. Again, we point to the Jerry Sloan School of Dirty Play. Heck, Raja Bell isn't even on this list, and we can guarantee I'll get "Where's Raja Bell?" comments. Stockton was both a flopper and a fouler. Rajon Rondo and Chris Paul were merely learning what Stockton mastered. Stockton was a genius at getting away with fouls while making it look like he was fouled when he was not. Where he truly excelled, though, was hiding contact when he was guarding the perimeter. He was able to absolutely mug opponents and steal the ball. Number 4, Metta World Peace. Metta World Peace hardly even needs an explanation, does he? He does what Scottie Pippen did, only he does it with an element of meanness which borders at times on cruelty. The most recent example is his outrageous elbowing of James Harden. I've talked about the distinction between dirty, cheap, and intense. World Peace is all three. He plays dirty and he plays cheap. He's been suspended 13 times for taking cheap shots. Certainly he's a crafty, wily defender who knows how to foul without getting caught, but he's cheap too. Number 3. Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman was a member of 2 of the dirtiest teams in his NBA tenure, and by golly, he was a big part of the reason for their dirtiness. Just as Stockton was the archetype of today's dirty point guards, and Scottie Pippen was the archetype of today's dirty wings, Dennis Rodman was the archetype of today's dirty power forwards. Before Anderson Varejao, before Joaquin Noah, and before Kevin Garnett, there was Dennis Rodman, the original high-energy, high-intensity big man. If you take eras and rules into consideration, Rodman is the greatest rebounder in the history of the game. He averaged 13.1 rebounds per game over the course of his career, the most of any player in the three-point era. Number 2. Bill Laimbeer. How bad was Bill Laimbeer? Let's put it this way. They made a video game titled Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball. The game was a kind of a cross between Death Race 2000 and basketball. Violence was encouraged. Laimbeer was the baddest of the bad boys, and he offered no apologies for it. He just said he did what he had to in order to win. You can't argue with the results. He has 2 rings. If there was an elbow to be thrown, Laimbeer was only too glad to throw it. He didn't just play dirty, he was proud to play dirty. In the single most physical era of basketball, he was the game's most physical player. Number 1. Bruce Bowen. Bruce Bowen was the all-time dirtiest player in the history of the NBA. He was everything that Ron Artest was or Scottie Pippen was, with one twist that can only be described as malicious. Bowen had a tendency to slip his foot under opponents' feet when they went up for a jump shot. When the players came down, they would ruin ankles and knees. Such a move can devastate a player's career, and Bowen's habit resulted in several players, including Steve Francis and Vince Carter, getting injured. Even when it's not resulting in injuries, the fear of an injury can throw a player off his rhythm. Bowen, even without the move, was one of the greatest defenders in the league's history and didn't need to resort to the habit. That tendency, along with the same kind of great but dirty play that the other great defensive wings on here had, earned him the top spot on the list.